Alrighty, so welcome to my VIVIDLOPE any percent with items speedrun tutorial. Now this video is going to cover just the items category. If you're interested in the itemless category, there will be another video on my channel. At the time of uploading it's not made yet, but it will be later, so if you're interested, check my channel or in the description of this video. At a future point, I will be adding it. This video will be going over the items category we're going to show off like the tech, the tricks, the route, and everything like that. This is working off the assumption that you've obviously already played through the game, you know all the stuff, you played all the levels, you know the mechanics, but we're still going to go over certain stuff that's exclusive to the run that you may not have actually encountered during casual play. And of course, it's just going to be pertaining to the items run. First thing is, you want to make sure that you're on the latest version on PC or running on any Switch build. So if you're on Switch, any version on the Switch is fine. If you're on PC, you need to be on version 1.4 or above. Right now, it is 1.4.1, but if you're playing on an older patch, because the older versions are still available for download, this is not possible on those older builds because of one addition that we'll get into here in a moment. So first things first with the items category is you're actually going to need two files. A file you're going to run on and a file you can use for setup. So I always clear off my first file, so I have this empty file here, and then the reason you need a setup file I'll explain once we get into it. But all you need to know is you're going to need to have a file, ideally that has completed the game already. So if you have a main file that you've been playing on, you can use that. So when we choose, we're going to hit start. And then there are three characters. In the items run, we use Miss Noir because of her abilities. For those that may not know and didn't play the new update, Miss Noir has the ability to do a couple different things depending on your inputs and what your power gauge is like. In comparison, Acru's ability is he moves faster, and Cerise allows her to tank a hit. Normally this game is a one-hit kill. She allows you to endure an attack. So the timing starts, and I have my live split up for just so you can see. And then I also have, of course, the input display, so you can see all the inputs I'm doing as I go through this, but I'll also be explaining them as I go. So the timing begins when you select Miss Noir, so we'll just do this. And then as the run begins, we're immediately going to start doing some stuff. So obviously this is where the run starts. What we're going to do is we're actually going to enable short mode. Typically, the game requires you to beat a variable amount of levels per world to move on to the next world. But enabling short mode sets it to only be 5 levels per world. Enabling that is simple. You just go up into this top left corner and just hold left against here. And that'll enable short mode. A little trick that I found that isn't really, not necessarily a trick, but a little thing you can do is if you're trying to enable start or short mode, you can hold left into this corner and then press the select menu to bring up the cosmetics screen. And if you hold left here, it continues to enable short mode. So you can use this, enable short mode while in that menu, and then you can also randomly have a cosmetic. Now, we have this little NPC here. His name is Wobbler. He's one of the enemies that you actually encounter in the game. This character has a forced interaction where with Miss Noir, it's at least like one text box, but with Cerise and Acru, it's several text boxes. And we can actually skip over this guy. So he actually has a detection range that is one tile around him. So if I go the one tile forward, I will trigger the interaction and I will be forced to see the text box. We can actually just barely jump over him. If I come up here, I'm still outside of his range of detection, but with a diagonal jump, I can actually just avoid his detection range completely. So let's see if I can get it. And there we go. So I completely skipped the interaction, which with Miss Noir, it doesn't really waste you a whole lot of time because it is only one text box. But with Cerise and Acru, there are several text boxes, so it's really good to be able to land that. Again, it is just a diagonal jump, so just down, right and down, you can jump. You can also do it from the bottom, but I always do it from the top because I'm going from the top with short mode down to that corner to then make the jump. And then we just start by going to the first world. And then you'll always hold the A button or action or whatever, the bottom button, to skip through the text or the cutscene. And then we're going to start with World 1-1. Now, At the start of every level, you see this little sequence where it's showing you the level. So I'm going to, we're going to go back here. So when you load into a level, it's going to show you a preview of the stage. Now, normally, what you can do is you can actually hold the A button to speed it up slightly, and then you get into the level faster. There is a way you can actually speed it up even more, and that is, as you load into the stage, you can actually press the retry button, which for me is the L3 button, and that's clicking on the left stick. If you press the retry button, it is designed to obviously make you reset the stage, but if you're doing it during this load-in, it actually skips the load-in. So if I'm mashing it, now there is no transition where it's showing you the level. That whole thing doesn't exist. It just skips by it. I'm going to put up on the screen right now a little comparison GIF that I made that shows the difference between them. And this is actually kind of dependent on your hardware. Depending on your hardware, it may be faster to just hold A throughout the transition or the intro than it is to press the retry. For me, my loads on my SSD are less than a second, so it's faster for me to just retry the stage and load in that way than it is to just hold the A button through the thing. So you'll see that quite often as we go in. And then as the actual level starts, what we're going to do is we're going to press the select button, or what is referred to as the equip menu. From here you get access to the items, and this is what makes the category the items category. The items allow you to, well, use any of these items at your own command. And as you can notice, despite having a new file, I have 99 of all 3 of these items. And this is why you need that setup file I mentioned earlier. With the setup file, you can use that file to buy all the items because the items are actually shared across all saves on your system. So as long as you have one file that can purchase all the items, you can just restock after every run and then just go into the next run with completely filled items. This menu alone and Miss Noir's abilities that we're about to get into separate the items and the itemless category. The itemless category can't use this menu whatsoever, nor can they use Miss Noir's abilities, which we're about to cover. So Miss Noir is a new character that was added in the Switch version and then version 1.4 on Steam. Her abilities are, depending on what her power gauge is like, she has a couple different things. If I press the top button, she can throw a fireball, and this can be used to get rid of enemies. If I hold the L2 and press A, she can dash, and has a little dash ability. Every time you use one of these abilities, it consumes some of the power gauge. So you can see on the right hand side it's going down, and now I can't use the abilities anymore. She has a couple more of them. So if I jump and then I press the top button, she will slam down and create 3x3s. Very similar to the impact item itself that I just picked up. So you can see it's very similar. So the way I have my splits up is I split for every level. So as we continue, I'm just going to show off that. But I'm going to retry this level because I want to actually show off the main strategy we do and the most powerful version of Miss Noir's abilities, and that is her rolling fire or her ground fire or whatever it's typically called. To do that, you press and hold the L2 button and then you press the top button. And if you hold both of them, she does this, where she starts to throw the rolling fires in a straight line. As you can see, it is very powerful, as it just filled this entire level in a matter of seconds. Now, there's actually another trick you can do alongside this. This rolling fire thing is an intended function of the game, but as you notice, we go kind of slow. She doesn't go very fast with it, but there is a way for us to actually speed that up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to press L2 and then the top button, which for me is the X button, because despite my controller input, I am not using a PlayStation controller. Now I'm actually going to hold the X button or the triangle button in the input, and then now if I walk around, it doesn't look like anything's happening. But now if I press L2, she will suddenly start throwing the fires in the direction I was facing before. And the reason this works is when you start this rolling fire, it actually remembers what direction you were facing. And so I can just move forward holding the X or triangle button. I'm probably just going to use the buttons that are on display instead going forward. But what I can do is I basically use it to sort of like store my directions, and then as I move over tiles, I can just press L2 to then just roll the fire along. Instead of having to be limited by the speed at which Miss Noir is going to run with the L2 button held down, which in this case is the walk button, I can then just use the triangle button instead and then press L2 to then use the item, or the ability in this case. So that is the main strategy, and we call that Noir quick strafing, where you hold triangle and then just press L2 to use it. That way you can go at a faster speed and still cover the same amount of ground. So that being said, let's now actually get into the second level. The way that you saw me do this first level is actually the way you'll want to do it in the run. So I'll do it one more time just to show it off. So we'll go back in. We go in this top corner. We throw it down, and then we just create a bunch of lines as we go. When you complete levels, you'll always want to either, depending on what your power gauge is on the left-hand side, you're going to want to either hold L2 and A to do a dash to quickly end the bonus phase. Miss Noir can use her abilities during the bonus phase at the risk of her power gauge that can no longer go up. Or if you have too low of power like I do right now, where I can't use the dash, you're going to want to always try and move at diagonals. This is because the bonus phase ends depending on how many times you've gone over tiles you've already filled in, and diagonals are the fastest way to do that. So now let's actually start going into levels and explain what's going on. So in 2-2, or 1-2, I'm going to go to this tile specifically and do the same thing. The reason I'm doing this is these little blue guys that I'm hitting will actually refill my power gauge as I'm going, allowing me to only end up using one max power item through that entire level. I can then just use that one max power and then just hit those tiles to fill in all of the tiles around me, which will then refill my power gauge and allow me to just keep going. Next level, again, we go here. This time I'm going to only fill in these two lines, and then I'm going to walk this line. And the reason I'm doing this is because if I walk over tiles that I'm filling in this way, I will lose my power gauge faster than I can gain it. So in these levels like that where they're straight hallways, it's generally better to fill in a part of it and then walk the next line than it is to fill in all of them and then walk over the tiles you've already created, because doing so will tank your power gauge. I also just keep realizing I'm forgetting to split every time I do this, but that's fine. This level, very much the same. You will do it with these two. You can stop for those two tiles. And then again, every time you need to make a directional change, you do have to reset the direction that you're facing and doing the L2 and triangle. So every time you have to change what direction you're facing, you'll always need to at least stop and then reset and let go of triangle to press the L2 and triangle at the same time again to then start it, and then you can let go of L2, hold triangle, and then just mash L2 to use the ability. And then with 1-5, what we can do is we can hit that. And then we can just basically create a circle around the stage. So we would use it, hit this roller, fill in, hit the roller, then change the direction to be up, hit the roller, hit the roller. And that way we never have to leave the middle of the stage. And then we hit alright, and that's when we would hit the split for, or what I would do is I would hit the split for the world after I see this level X cleared. So we'll go on to the next one. Now, this guy here is how you can restock on items. We won't actually be restocking any items during the normal run itself, but because I am showcasing stuff, I'm going to open up this just so you can see. The only item that doesn't transfer over is the 1-up. You can buy those over the course of your run if you'd like, but because I'm going to be showcasing a lot of stuff and probably repeating levels quite often, I am going to restock on stuff as we go. So then we'll walk up, and then we're going to enter World 2. Again, we want to just hold the cross or X to skip those, mash X to skip that, and now we begin to 1. What we want to do here is we're going to do the max power, and then we're going to walk down at a diagonal, and then walk back up at a diagonal. And then we want to aim down. We can grab the fruit to refill our power. We'll dash, and then we'll use these paint rollers to fill in some of the ground for us. And then we'll just go around to fill the rest of it. And then always dash if you have the ability. You will dash to finish the level. Now we'll go into 2-2. Same thing. This level is a bunch of straight lines. So we will do the same strat. Oh, completely ignore that. If you do have to end up using more items, that is fine. A lot of it is very lenient with how much like spares you have, but it is very much just going in the straight lines to fill it in. Then we go into 2-4. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to use the max power. Then we jump over here, and then we're going to dash. And now we're going to avoid this paint roller, because if we hit it, then we will end up walking over things we've already filled in, which I've discussed already. Ends up slowing us down. So that's how we do that. And then in 2-6, this is the same sort of deal where we would walk one path as we fill in the others. It's just so we don't burn through the power gauge as we do this. There is technically a way for us to, we can use the dash to do the same thing, to just sort of speed through. But again, that will chew through our power gauge, so we want to use that as little as often and just try to keep in straight lines. Here we have a level that has the undos. So at the top you can see it goes from purple, green, purple. That's when we can use the good shoes. The good shoes will stop you from undoing tiles you're walking back over. If you don't feel confident in this, you can do it and use that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to equip it, go into this top corner. I'm going to use a rolling fire until this final tile here, where I'm going to just then dash. And then that's how we can finish that one quickly. And we can see mentions that there's new items. We don't care. We're just going to keep moving into World 3. And the way you're seeing me do these levels and the way I'm outlining these aren't all like the best, most optimal way. A lot of the times these levels require a lot of on-the-fly thinking because of the enemy spawns and where the enemies are moving. So some of the stuff you'll see me do may not be the best route through the level, but it is a way that I'm doing it to avoid certain scenarios or avoiding certain enemies. So just keep that in mind, and we will cover more ways to work around that as we get further into the run. With 3-1, it is a giant cube. And what we would do is the same thing, but we want to make sure we're hitting these bubbles. These bubbles will actually refill our power gauge, so we can just use these bubbles to give us a free refill, and that way we can avoid having to spend more max powers. And then here, we start by throwing one to each side, and then throwing to the each direction. And then we want to walk up here. And then we can grab the fruit to refill our power. And I'm going to use another max power. And there we go. You will notice that sometimes it feels... You will notice that sometimes it feels like it's not actually storing your directionals when you press the L2 and triangle at the same time. That is common. So if you feel like, despite the fact you press them at the same time and you're still holding triangle and it's not saving the direction you went, that is perfectly normal. That happens to me quite a bit. It's just something you have to very quickly adapt to, that it's not like remembering your directions. Here, what we'll do is very much the same as we have been. We're going to fill these in. I'm going to fill in that direction first, and then I'm going to walk this. Now I mentioned you want to not walk over tiles you're already coloring in, but for this one, it's just still sort of the best way to do it, to walk back over tiles you're already filling in. Then we have 310. And we can pick this guy up to give us a refill. And then I can use another max power. And there we go. And this one, we actually don't need to use any items. This one is very simple. Now, this is just a giant circle we're going to just be constantly pushed through because of these boost tiles. What I do is whenever I hit this bottom left quadrant of this cube, that's when I change the direction. So as I get here, I'm going to move slightly to the right, slightly to the right, slightly to the right. And when I grab that last key, that's when I'm going to come up here. I'm going to dash. I'm just going to kick those paint rollers. And then I can do the circle around here. And then when I hit the bonus phase, I can just come down here and finish it. Now opens World 4, so we'll move on. So with 4-2, we're going to use another item in conjunction to the max power. So here we have some of the new items we have are the paint balloon and the bomb. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the max power. I'm going to go up here, and then once this guy spawns, I'm going to use the bomb to kill him and then restock my power gauge. Same thing here. He spawns. I'm going to kill him and restock my power gauge. And then up here, once we get to this guy, there we go. The bomb will kill all enemies that are currently spawned and then give you power based on how many of them were eliminated. So there we use it so we can continue to hold a direction to do the rolling fire, kill the enemy to recharge our power gauge, and we're basically using the bomb as a pseudo max power so that we don't spend so much max power abilities. I forgot to mention earlier, but if you do need a setup file, if your main file doesn't have, like, if you look at the top right corner, you can see my my gems. My gem count is astronomical due to a bunch of practice and a bunch of runs. So if you have a file that doesn't have nearly as much as I do, we do have on the speedrun.com page a file you can use that has a bunch of the items purchased and then a bunch of the gems as currency that you can use to get started as well. So if you need that, it is something on the speedrun.com page. We have both a save for the PC and the Switch version. If your Switch is homebrewed, you can inject the save that way. If you're on PC, you can just drop the save file into your app data folder. So that will just keep moving on into the next level. This level has some straight lines, so we're just going to walk up here. I'm going to walk back over here. There we go. Very simple level, bunch of straight lines. Those are the kind of levels that we like to see the most. Anything that has a straight line is what we want to aim for. And then one of the advantages, I haven't really covered it for levels like this one that have, we see it goes from gray to green to purple. One of the advantages that Noir's ability, the Rolling Fire, has is that it will actually set whatever color, it'll set to whatever color it needs to be to finish the level. So in this case, normal items, like if I were to use the impact, and I use impact, it sets these tiles to gray, which means I'd have to do it again to set it to purple. But if I use the Rolling Fire, it sets them all to purple. This is why, one of the main reasons why it's so powerful, is it sets it to whatever it needs to be. And then with this level, what we want to do is we basically want to always hold left. We'll ignore that. The path we're trying to go is we're always going to go left. And then once we reach the end here, we reach like this next quadrant, we're going to fill in these quadrants and then just continue. And then when we reach the final one, that's when we go right to fill in this last couple tiles. 410 is where we'll see invisible tiles. These don't make a whole lot of deal, it's not a big deal for us. And then because I didn't have enough power, I have to just walk that. And that somehow ended up being a gold. This level is notorious for how difficult it used to be in the run. So here it goes from gray to green to purple and then back to gray. So if you walk back over the tile again that you've already turned purple in this case, it'll undo it back to gray. So that means you have to then walk back over them all again. This is one of the levels that we used to spam the good shoes on, but we actually don't need it anymore because of Miss Noir. So I'll show you what I'm going to do. I'm going to use max power, then I'm going to hug this left wall, do it a bunch here, and then once I reach the bottom, I'm actually going to use this. I'm going to walk over here, and then once I get to the edge here, I'm going to then just use the rolling fire to then fill in everything. I did end up messing this up. So what you would normally do is you would go around the whole level. So I will do this one more time just to show that I'm what I'm actually trying to do. And then I walk this final one. And then once I reach the end, that's how it's supposed to play out. And then we can move on. That one used to be very tricky back before Miss Noir existed, and we had to just do that level normally. And then the enemies in that level very quickly, it gets very out of hand very quickly. And then when we get into 5-2, again, max power. And then here we're going to pick up the wrap paper item. Now, we can use a couple of it, but one of the downsides Miss Noir has is that the amount of items she can use is reduced. So she doesn't have as many item usages as the other characters. And then just going to wrap around this pole, whatever, and then to fill in the rest of it. Here, we're actually going to see a different item. I'm going to equip the stamp. The stamp does the same thing where, as you can see, it goes from gray to green to gold or yellow. This one, the stamp actually sets it to whatever color it needs to be. We're going to come to the edge here. I'm going to use a rolling fire on these tiles here, fill in these, and then walk back over this direction. And you're going to want to try and use the stamp to refill it as it runs out. So here, that was my last stamp, so I'm going to use it again. We're going to come up here, fill in that. And then we're going to come this way. And you see these paths on the side are filled in already for us because we used the rolling fire on them earlier. And you should always end up with this last 3x3 being how you finish the level. Another one where we kind of just walk it through. And then here we're going to actually use the dash because it's a straight line here. We're going to fill this in. Normally, if you're doing the normal, like the items list, you would pick up the wrap paper that spawns up past us, but we do not need it because obviously we have basically the same functionality as the wrap paper, and I'll explain a bit more later when we get to it. But that's how that level's done. And then we can get into 5-9. This one is a little fun. What we can do is we can just go along here, spam into these little crevices, and then we're going to walk up till we get to the end here. And now I'm going to do the same thing, but on this direction. And then we never have to actually leave the middle of the level that way. Now here's a little bit of a tricky one. This level is also known for being annoying because this has the same undo tiles. So what we're going to do here is I'm going to walk into this corner, fill it in, and then you may notice as I open the equip menu to use max power again, you'll notice on the input display I am still holding triangle. This is so that I can continue to just immediately go into using the rolling fire again. Because if I were to let go in this menu, then I would have to reset my directional storage. So doing it this way means I can just continue to do it. And then we want to leave these last couple tiles so we can come down here, jump onto this, and then do it this way. Like that. And that's how that level's done. Now we get into World 6. World 6 is the world where prior to Miss Noir's introduction, World 6 is where we got introduced to the rat paper item, and we were able to use the rat paper freely. The rat paper is an incredibly useful item, though it has become a little bit less useful due to Miss Noir's rolling fire ability basically doing the exact same thing. If you're playing the items run as a character that isn't Miss Noir, the rat paper is still the best item to use, but because of Miss Noir's rolling fire ability, it is inferior to it purely because Miss Noir has less rat paper usages than any other character. And I'll show you what I mean. So the rat paper here, if I equip this, you can see at the top right, I only have 4 uses. If I was playing as Cerise or Acrew, that would be 12 uses. And the rat paper functions very similar to the rolling fire. If I press the square button, I'm going to throw one. If I hold the square button, I can now strafe with it, where any direction that I move into, Miss Noir is going to throw the next one the second I hit the next tile. It is very useful for a lot of the straight lines that we've been doing with Miss Noir, but because she gets so few of them, you end up spending more time chaining the rat papers together than it is to then just use max power and do it this way. The rat paper is slightly faster. You do have a slightly faster movement speed than even with the quick strafing that I'm doing here, but you spend more time menuing, so you end up losing time in the long run. So doing it with the rolling fire as opposed to the rat paper, which is technically faster movement-wise, you spend more time menuing, so you lose out on that time anyway, especially since the menuing to refill your power gauge to continue quick strafing is just 2 buttons, select and then X. So we move on to the next one. Now this one, I'm going to equip the good shoes, and I'm going to walk into this corner, and I'm going to just spam as I go. And then when I reach here, I'm going to then just spam up. And then when I reach the bottom here, I'm going to stop. And then I'm going to just walk forward as I go again. With the good shoes, I can walk on these tiles that are normally supposed to then just put them back to blue, but because I have the good shoes, I can just walk over them freely again. Then with 6-2, this is a very simple level. I'm going to equip, I'm going to throw a rolling fire in each one of those directions, come up here, and then I'm just going to dash a bunch. And then once I reach here, I'm going to change lanes and just dash this way a bunch. And then end it by just dashing behind me. Here what we're going to do is we're going to start by pushing these 3 rollers down. And then I'm going to then just strafe all around the level here. And then once I make it back, I jump into this middle section here, and then I can just kick these rollers over, and that should end the level. And then for here, everything's just like a straight cylinder. So it's perfect for the rolling fire. We can just walk in and then just spam it to fill the cylinder. And then here we have ice physics, where the fun thing about ice physics in VIVIDLOPE is your items and abilities follow the ice physics. So as long as you throw one in the weird, wacky, wild ice physics, they will go in all sorts of directions as well, which normally would suck. If you're playing a normal game that has ice physics, being thrown around wildly is not fun, but it is very helpful when we want our items to just fill any tile in that it comes in contact with. So we actually really like it there, and especially that final part where it is a bunch of the ice. You want to stay close to where you entered the ice tiles, throw all of your rolling fires, and then use the non-ice tiles to end the stage quickly. So here with 7-1, we're going to start by going up here. And then we can use these collapsible tiles to then let us underneath to finish out the level. Now here's a bit of a trickier level. This is one of the few levels that I will still use rat paper as Miss Noir because we have these very tight and cramped spaces. So it is still slightly faster to menu to use those than it is to quick strafe, just for these small spaces. And then here we have this little rotating, I don't even know, laser. Depending on where this laser spawns, it can really mess with you. But you want to fill in as much of that's the center square here as possible while avoiding the laser bar. And then just coming slightly into these side parts to then fill those in. And then you'll come up here, then just fill in the sides of this part to finish the level. It is very easy to get jump scared by that laser bar and end up dying to it. So if you do end up not filling as much of that square as you feel like you should, this upper path that I finished level at has quite a few squares you can use to fill in the gaps for what didn't get filled in at the center. Now here's a level where we're going to actually abuse an unintended or maybe a sort of intended mechanic. This is one of the levels where it forces you to use an ability. So if I pick up this item, this like right here, this is the super jump item. Now the super jump item cannot be replaced by any other item. So if I use it or if I pick it up, I cannot use any other item. But what I still want to go and finish the level, the super jump obviously allows us to jump farther. But what I'm going to do is after you use the bomb ability, not only does the game kill all the enemies on the screen, but as a sort of measure in case enemies were spawning on you or on top of you as you use it, it also provides you some invulnerability frames. So I can use that to then just walk over these tiles that would normally kill me instantly. And there's actually just enough time where I can cross all of it. So we cross all of those, we're going to hit all of these paint rollers, and then fill in these little gaps that they leave behind. Then again, we're going to use that. And that comes up quite a bit. The bomb giving you iframes allows you to sort of damage boost through tiles like that that'll insta-kill you, which allows us to skip the super jump, which allows us to save time because we can use other items. If you're doing the normal items run without Miss Noir, you can use the rat paper instead. Or in our case, we can just use the rolling fire, which doesn't require an item usage at all anyway. So we can just skip the super jump because it just doesn't contribute anything whatsoever in all of the runs aside from itemless. The itemless run still grabs it because without the use of the bomb, we can't damage boost through the tiles. Now this one, what we're going to do is we're going to use max power, and then we're actually going to go up a bit, and then we're going to just circle this whole area and use the rat paper, or the rolling fire. Once we reach the end, I'm going to swap and start facing upwards as I do it. And then when I reach this last one, I'm going to come up, dash, refill again, and then just keep going. And then once we reach it, we can just dash down to finish. Now the reason I go up a little bit is so I can reach the full length of the rolling fire so it fills in the most amount it possibly can, going back to the spawn area and filling that in as I circle around. And then once I make that full circle, then I just move up and then start rolling it from there. And then once I reach the end of that, I just dash up to then just continue rolling the fire. Now here, with this one, what we want to do is we'll fill in this, and then we're going to want, you have two options here. This area, the lower part, has these tiles. These are going to instantly kill you. You have two options. You can either just use the L2 and A, or circle, to dash through them, Or if you want to be a little bit more safe, you can use the bomb ability, or the bomb item, to then just ensure that you have the iframes to just freely go through it. And then you drop down, and then much like before, we just kind of fill these in as we go. Hitting the bubbles are always useful for a refill of your power gauge, and then they also, you didn't see it there, but they will kill enemies if they are in the radius of the bubbles explosion. So they're also useful for getting rid of enemies very quickly. Now going into World 8, we get access to the item that single-handedly makes the wrap paper look inferior, but only for certain cases. The item we're about to get is the Paint Burst, which fills in an area, like a great amount of an area around Miss Noir, Cerise, or Acre, or whoever you're playing, and is good for giant open spaces, as opposed to just straight lines. So what we're going to do is I'm going to start 8-1. Now I'm actually not going to use the max power. Instead, I'm going to come over here to Paint Burst. I'm going to use one, queue up another one, and then once I get onto this tile, I'm going to stop any sort of directional input. I'm not holding any direction right now. I'm going to then just use it, walk over here, stop on this tile in the middle, again, not holding any direction. I'm going to choose the Paint Burst, use it, then walk, stop in the middle here, again, no input, Paint Burst, walk again, middle, no input, Paint Burst. And the reason I'm specifying that I'm not doing any inputs is if it is so finicky and so precise that if you move one extra tile after you select the Paint Burst and you're just one tile forward, you actually don't fill enough and you overlap the tiles you have already filled in prior, that you actually don't fill the necessary amount of tiles. So stopping in those middle sections to Paint Burst and then moving again ensures that you're hitting just the amount of tiles you need and not causing too much overlap. In 8-3, this is normally a very obnoxious level because you have all of these light bulbs you have to fill in. I'm going to Paint Burst here. I'm going to use a bomb to kill the enemy. I'm going to Paint Burst in the middle. I'm going to come over here to where the shield is. I'm going to Paint Burst there. I will Paint Burst in this corner. You can use another one right here to fill in that spot. I'm going to come above this shield tile here, and that should fill it in. And that's that. Normally you would, in like the itemless run, you would use the light bulbs to change the color of the tiles underneath them and around them to sort of fill in level a little bit quicker. But because we have the Paint Burst, we actually don't need to rely on that at all. We're going to do a very similar thing here. I'm going to use the Paint Burst. And I'm going to use another one here. I'm actually going to use the max power so that I can dash. And now I'm going to go around the level and use the Paint Burst to just fill in as I dash around the place. And that's it. You can also, if you don't have a dash and your power gauge is a little bit close to being able to use the ability, so where walking over certain tiles is too slow, if you go into a tile that is an insta-kill or a fire tile, it will instantly end the bonus phase as well, because those are meant to kill you, so they will instantly tank your power gauge to nothing. So in that level, I could have walked back over the fire tiles that I ignited to end my bonus phase instantly. Here, I'm going to use max power. I'm going to use the Paint Burst here. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to go up a bit, use another Paint Burst. Come over to here, these guys, use a Paint Burst. Stand right here between these two bombs, Paint Burst. Come up to this one, Paint Burst. And then come down here, Paint Burst. And then, depending on where your positioning was, if your positioning is better than mine, you will have filled in the rest of the level with that last one, not the one I just used, but the one before that. But my positioning was a little off, so I had to go back a little bit. Here, we're going to use max power, stand in this middle spot, and use Paint Burst. And as you notice, the paint burst does the same thing as the rolling fire and the wrap paper and the stamp, where it sets the color we need it to be to whatever the final color is. So instead of going from gray to peach to green, it is going straight to green. And that's what we want. We're going to dash here, not use the bomb again, use another paint burst, throw some rolling fire up there, come down here, paint burst again, jump over here. Be very careful because there's a bomb right there. Come up a bit, paint burst, and then just right here on this tile, you can use the final paint burst. And that's it. As you can see, paint burst is very, very useful. Does a great job at filling in areas that are just massive, and even tight spaces like that it's still very useful for, because we don't have to make nearly as much movement, and we don't even really have to interact with these fan tiles that are actually a normal key part of World 8. We can just completely skip over them, and we don't have to interact with them at all. Now we circle back to where we went to World 7, so we can enter World 9. Now with World 9, the first level is a giant cube. So what we're going to do is I'm going to use max power, I'm going to use paint burst, and then right as I reach the end of the dash, I'm going to use the next paint burst. You should ideally end up right here where you have a little bit of a gap. You can then walk into the middle here, paint burst, dash, dash, paint burst. I'm going to actually use a bomb because this guy is right there. Paint burst, and that should fill in the rest of the level. 9-2 is a special case in which we're going to use the paint burst in actually tight spaces rather than giant open ones. So I'm going to use max power, I'm going to use paint burst, I'm going to stand specifically on this tile, paint burst, go up 3 tiles, paint burst, and then I'm going to come here, stand, paint burst. I'm going to jump into this middle spot here, paint burst, and then just to the top right of this death tile, I'll paint burst, and then I will paint burst right here. And that will always end up 100% of the time, filling in the whole level. 9-7, it's a bit of the same, so it's all just straight lines, which you would think it would be better to either do the wrap paper, or like wrap paper, rolling bomb, or even just dashing. It is still slightly faster to paint burst than dash, dash, paint burst, dash, 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 paint burst, dash, dash, dash. The only thing you have to be careful of is that making sure that you're going into new directions, which I messed up there. So dash, 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 paint burst. So despite the fact that it is straight lines, if you use the paint burst in the middle of those sections, you get enough of coverage to where it actually saves more time to do that slight bit of more menuing than it is to do any of the other options. So 9-12 is a giant flat area, so you can imagine what's going to happen here. Max power, paint burst, and this one you kind of just have to feel it out. I usually just dash around, and whenever I reach the end of the dash, that's when I use the next paint burst. And there we go. Now with 9-14, again, I'm going to start with a paint burst in the middle here. I can then paint burst at the base of this dash tile here, then one up here, one the complete opposite end. I'm going to use a bomb to get rid of this guy. Use a paint burst at the bottom of that tile, paint burst at the bottom of that tile, and then I can come over here and paint burst at the bottom of this tile. And there we go. And now we go into the final world. Now, before we go in here, I am just going to restock on the max power just for the sake of having stuff to having some to showcase stuff with. But as you can see, all the other items become available as you unlock them for the equip menu. You can then purchase them in the store, so you can restock on them. So I'm going to restock on this real quick. Okay, so I just went ahead and actually just restocked on everything, but depending on how much you're using, you should never actually have to restock throughout the run. You should have more than enough to cover everything. So when we reach the final world, we now have another NPC that wants to talk to us. And we can actually skip this guy much the same as we do with the one at the beginning of the run. And the way we do this one is now we need to hold up and to the right and then jump as we approach. I do have a specific video for both of these skips that I'll link in the description if you want to see them in more depth. But that's pretty much it. Is I'm going to walk forward because his detection range is the next couple tiles in front of me. So this is the last tile I can step on that won't trigger his text box. So I'm going to walk in and then just hold up, and then I can jump over his detection range, and then I can enter the final world. And then I'm just going to hold X to skip the cutscene. And then there is a different behavior here with the levels in the final world. So I just mentioned, and I've been showing throughout the whole run, is as I load into levels, I'm mashing the retry button to skip the stage intro sequence. The final world, all of the levels are actually strung together as if they are one level. So if you press and you mash the retry, it'll send you back to the first level of the final world no matter where you are. So this is the only time in the run where you will want to instead hold X to speed up the intro sequence rather than using the retry, because then it'll just send you back. I have actually lost runs to accidentally mashing and sending myself back to level 1 or final 1. So when you load in, it asks you what difficulty you want to do. We're just going to do normal because that's what we've been doing the whole run on. And then I'm just going to hold X to speed through here. So the difference with the final world is now we have max power the whole time, and our goal is to never actually let it deplete. But our whole goal throughout the entire run to begin with has been not letting it deplete. So what we're going to do is we're going to start by using a paint burst here. We're going to fill in this area. I'm just going to fill that in. Paint burst. And then we want to use the rolling fire to fill in those. Paint burst. Paint burst. Fill in those. Fill in those. Fill in what didn't get caught there. And then we can paint burst and paint burst. You can also substitute using more rolling fires in the paint burst depending on how much you have. Here, I don't need to use the max power, but I did it anyways. I pick up the bomb or the shield. We're gonna fill in these tiles. We're gonna come this way, jump up here. I'm going to use max power to just give myself more leverage. And then I dash to this corner because I can just grab these tiles as I'm circling back. Here, rolling fire up. Same with here. Then we reach this spot. You're going to want to hit these and then not do too much of an input to the left, because then you will drop down to the level below us that we've already filled in. And then we can just walk back to fill it in. Now here, what we're going to do is we're going to paint burst and then just work around these objects, these like orbs that are coming through, and just sort of paint burst our way through. Like that. And then here, we're going to paint burst at the lower spot. And we're going to paint burst at the top to make those invisible, to like hit those invisible tiles. We're going to hit these dash blocks on both directions. Then we're going to go back down. We're going to use paint burst. And then another one. And then we're actually going to use the stamp to hit these. These are tiles that will ignite if you walk over them. So using the stamp makes it to where I don't have to worry about, accidentally catching myself on fire. Then we want to always catch these paths off to the side that are invisible. It's fine if I pick up that impact, it doesn't matter. Then now, as you go into the middle, if you have your shield from the beginning of the level still, you can just go straight in the middle with a paint burst and fill it in. Or if you don't have your shield and you want to make sure that you're still safe, you can use a bomb, then quickly equip the paint burst, land in here where no matter what orientation those guys are in, you'll be safe. Here, I'm going to stand in the middle, paint burst, dash, and then paint burst at the end of the dash. And a bomb to get rid of that guy. We're just going to do this a bunch until we get the whole thing filled in. And we're going to go here and just repeat. Now with these, we can hit the middle there, and that was unfortunate. These little guys here are the same ones that I'll just like fill in a bunch of the tiles around them. They will not get these the very edges, so if you haven't caught the very edge of those, you'll need to like fill in these ends here by just dashing through them. And then you can use those to fill in the rest of it. Final 6 is a bit of a nightmare for me. So what we're going to do is we're going to just fill in these first 3 tiles, or these first 3 squares, and then we're going to come down on this third one to take this path. And because I have the direction stored, I can just make use of a bunch of just straight downs. That way I don't have to make any sort of adjustments to what direction I'm facing. I can just prioritize by keeping all of the directions I'm filling in being just straight down. And now we enter the final level, which is just a cube. So much like before, what we're going to do is we're just going to fill in. There is actually a faster way that I have found to fill in this level that I just completely spaced on doing as a part of this. But basically, you can just do the similar thing to what I did in 9.1, where you just use paint burst and then just dash, and then just use another paint burst once you reach the end of the dash. And then there's one tile I missed, and timing ends when you finish the level. And then we use in-game time, so we still need to go through the whole end sequence here. So we'll finish this, just continuously hold X. And then we reach the result screen. So 54:25, which for the purpose of this, that's not too bad. But this is where you would have your final time for the run. We use in-game time, that way we can accommodate anybody on any platform and any type of hardware, because the in-game time is going to be accurate no matter what, where with real time you're going to be susceptible to, you know, if you're running on like a hard disk instead of a solid state drive, or if you're playing on Switch where the loads aren't as fast as PC. It just makes it a little bit more even where we account for in-game time as opposed to real time. But that is pretty much the entirety of the item speedrun, level by level, with the tech and strats that we have for the runs. If you want to know more, as I mentioned, I do have videos on like the wobbler skips. I have videos dedicated to showing off the wrap paper strafing and the noir quick strafing that will be linked in the description as well. If you want to look into more of those, if you don't want to watch my actual record at the time of recording this, I will put that link in the description as well as our speedrun.com page and our Discord if you're interested in talking to us. But with that, that is the tutorial for how to do the item speedrun. In the future, I will be making the itemless video to go and complement this one. So if you're interested in checking that out, you might want to stick around if you're interested more in that run. But in the meantime, thank you for checking this out.